Hi guys, my name is Trinity, and if you are here to see my quarter two good, bad, and ugly. Now, let me preface this, as I always do, by saying I do not think the DNFs are ugly. I don't think the bad are necessarily bad books. It just seems how they work out for me, and I think it's a funny title. So, quarter two, good, bad, and ugly. Now, as always, let's start with the DNFs. And the one that everyone was probably surprised to see me, one DNF and to give away on my channel is the Atlas 6. Now, I read this thinking, okay, Fairy Loot, they have a tendency to have emerging adult authors coming from YA into adult, and this was going to be one of those, and maybe set expectations accordingly. I have to say, this is probably my biggest disappointment of the quarter because so many people have loved the Atlas 6, and I had a very beautiful edition of the Atlas 6 on my shelves. However, I did not like it at all. I didn't like the pacing. I thought the structure was very broken. I didn't like the magic system that was in place. I liked that we were at the Library of Alexandria, that it still existed. That's about it. That's about it. I didn't like the characters. I'm not even saying that they're unlikable people, though some of them are. I couldn't connect with the characters. We weren't in their heads long enough. It's only about a 300 and some odd page book, and there were 6 POVs, and I hated that. I hated it. That said, there's a lot of people who really like the Atlas 6. There's a lot of people who really like it. I've seen so many people giving it 5 stars. It just was not for me. The next book that I DNF'd would be Truth of the Divine by Lindsay Ellis. Now, this one I had issues with. I had quite a few issues with, in fact. I really loved the first book of this series, and you guys might be thinking, oh, you DNF'd it because she falls for an alien or might fall for an alien. No, I'm a Mass Effect fan, so that is not a problem for me. My problem with this book is the way that Lindsay Ellis handled PTSD and the way the characters in this book handled the main characters' PTSD. How they reacted and responded to her was not okay. Not okay in my book. And I even posted a page to the Discord. I'm like, am I just reading into this? This is what this says, right? And they were like, oh, that what? And so it wasn't just me. It was not just me who was like, that was really inappropriate. And having mental issues myself, and that being a problem that I deal with, I was not okay with the things that were happening around this person and the way the PTSD was handled in the book. I hated it. I hated it. I did, didn't I? I hated it. So I ended up DNFing it, and as much as I would have liked to see that relationship play out, especially because we ended on a very heavy friendship note in the final part of the first book, I really wanted to see how we moved forward in that aspect. But no, I couldn't handle that one. And the last DNF I had for quarter two would be Before They Are Hanged. So let me just talk about this one for a minute. I'm gonna need some water. Okay, so I am very much a plot-driven reader. I have, over the last year or so, found a couple of authors that I can read that are character driven, but still their writing is good enough that I don't care. I don't care that we don't have too much of a plot. Loved the blade itself. You guys know I'm a huge fan of Anthony Ryan. I have said that the Pariah, which isn't in here, but the Martyr is. I've said that the Pariah is very character driven, but I love Anthony Ryan. I'm reading Live Ship Traders and loving that. But guys, I do not like character-driven journeys. That is like my antithesis. I can't handle it. Do not like it at all. Character-driven journeys will drive me insane, and I will start yelling about it. And as much as I loved Abercrombie's writing in The Blade itself, we started journeying, and it was character-driven, and I want to say about 30% of the way through. It might have even been close to 40. And I was done. I was like, even though I like his writing, this isn't doing it for me. This is really not doing it for me. And I reached out to a friend and I was like, okay, tell me why you don't like this book, because I now need to know. Do I DNF it? And what they told me, DNF'd it immediately, because if I would have gotten to the end of the book to get that ending, I would have been ticked. So ticked off. I already told you guys I once threw The Blade itself across the room. I would have thrown this one in the trash. It would have just gone in the trash. And so I ended up unhauling most of my Joe Abercrombie, including First Law. And then, well, they're all First Law, really, but the First Law trilogy and the standalones, except for Best Served Cold. So I'm still going to give Best Served Cold a try. Everyone tells me that that one is one I should actually really like. So maybe that will be the one Joe Abercrombie I hold on to. But before they are hanged, I was so disappointed. So disappointed, and I DNF'd it. Okay, next we are going to talk about books that I did not DNF but disappointed me anyway. And I can't do this video without talking about Den of Vipers. Den of Vipers is erotica, and it is really like dark erotica, I guess you could say. I mean, I don't know how else to say that. But I read it for a book talk favorite, and because a lot of my friends on the Discord really wanted me to read it, give my 2 cents on it, because so many other people have loved it that they wanted to know what I thought about it. I hated it. I loved my experience of reading it though, because me and a couple of my friends on the Discord read it together and just kind of had a fun time tearing it apart. But this is not for the faint of heart. It gets gross. There's some kinks in it that, torture is part of it. So there's some torture porn in it. And I'm like, you know what? No, let's not. Can we just never go back to anything like Den of Vipers again, please? And thank you, even though reading it with the Discord girls was kind of fun. I still gave this book 2 stars. And then that ending, I will not get over how stupid that ending was. I hated that. That was just the dumbest thing I've ever seen. Okay, we're done with Den of Vipers. I don't have to talk about Den of Vipers anymore, right? This is the quarter wrap up. I don't have to talk about it at the end of the year. We're done. Next, I read Crosstalk, and I really wanted to like this book because the setup sounded like it was going to be really cool. We have a couple who are wanting to do this new surgery that lets them be empathic with each other, and celebrities are doing it, the rich and famous are doing it, stuff like that. And it just helps you to be more intimate with your partner. I thought that was a really cool concept, but this book beat a dead horse so badly. The things that she was complaining about constantly, it just got repetitive. The things that were happening were really repetitive. And then the relationship that she had with the guy that she was supposed to be getting the surgery with was bad. It was really bad. And then there was another, I guess you could kind of call it a love triangle. It wasn't really a love triangle, but there was another guy who gets involved and tells her her history and why she ended up the way she was after the surgery, and she has these new powers and this is why. And he was kind of fodder for the story. I don't know. There was a lot of things I ended up just really not liking about it. The writing, though, it was good. The writing, I would definitely try something else from this author, Connie Willis. But like, I just, this was so disappointing. Just so disappointing. And then the last of my disappointments, I didn't think was bad. And I think it was the audiobook that really kind of killed this book for me. And like I said, I say killed it, but I liked the idea of it. However, because of the audiobook, the pacing was horrendous. I had such a hard time getting through that audiobook that I turned it off. I like immersive reading. I really like immersive reading, but it was bad enough that I turned the audiobook off, and by the time I was done with the book, I ended up just like passing it on because The Bladed Faith by David Dalglish. I own most David Dalglish books because his books sound so good. And yeah, I've bought all of them. Like, I own The Keepers. I own what's the other one? Dance of Cloaks. What's I don't remember what that series is. I own the Seraphim series. And so like the fact that I just absolutely fall in love with his synopses and didn't love the first book I actually picked up, I'm not going to count him as like a never will read again, but that audiobook was so bad. It was so bad. So the girl, and it was the female narrator. The male narrator I actually really enjoyed, but she would pause at the end of the line, not the end of a sentence. And she would, like, it would break up the pacing quite a bit. And I hated that. And then she had a bit of a speech impediment, which made it hard to understand. So if you weren't immersive reading, it would be hard to understand her. So like, it was really disappointing, even though at the end of the day, when all was said and done, I actually liked the book and what it did and the plot and the characters. I really enjoyed them. I just had a bad experience listening to it. Okay, now I have my hits. So let's talk about two kind of in tandem because they're by the same author. King of Assassins by R.J. Barker. I finally finished the Wounded Kingdom trilogy within the second quarter. Loved it. I loved it. I love Gerton Clubfoot. I love his whole story. I love how it ends. It's explosive the way it ends. Can't talk too much about King of Assassins because it's the final book in a series and there are a lot of spoilery things about the second book that are in the third. But I really love the way the series wrapped up. It was fantastic. It's right there. Can you guys see it? It's right there. Yeah. And I also loved The Bone Ships, which is right beside it. Right there. That was the other one that I read by him. I was hoping for something like Live Ship, and it delivered in that. And I love R.J. Barker's writing. His writing is just so good. It's so immersive in its own. You know, without the audiobook, I'm going to get really excited, guys. This happens to me every time I talk about books that I really enjoy. But the character work in the Bone Ships is even better than in the Wounded Kingdom. And I'm not a character-driven reader, like I said a million times before, but I really loved the way the story played out with the characters in the Bone Ships. And I'm so excited to read Call of Bone Ships. It's actually one that's like, I'm eager to get to. I need to get to it, and I'm supposed to be reading the third one this month. So, we'll get there. We'll get there. And then one that really surprised me is one I have DNF'd before. But one of my friends, Nora, convinced me to read The City of Brass. And I did not like the slow start of it at all. Now, if that slow start wasn't there, this would be a 5-star book. I've always heard that I would really like the Daevabad trilogy, but every time someone talked about it, they talked about how the first third of it is just so dang slow, it's hard to get through. For me, that says, big red flashing light, Trinity, you're not gonna like this. Not at all. And I didn't. So last year, I participated in a readathon, got through that slow part, DNF'd it. So when I went back to pick it up, it had actually irritated me so much, that slow part that I read, that I remembered what happened. And so I started the book from where I left off. And whoa, the completely different reading experience from whenever I picked it up the last time, because I got to skip that slow part. And my reading experience of the second time around was 5 stars. But I can't get past that initial beginning where it's so slow that I DNF'd it. So I ended up giving it 4.5 stars because had to knock it down from the 5-star just because of that. But I absolutely loved it. I loved it. And one that was really surprising for me was the Bone Houses. So I really like stories that are rich with lore and magic and just have this like gothic feel, the witchy type stuff. It really, really like gets to me. I really love that stuff. And this book had been on my TBR for a long time. And then I finally picked it up for the May the Force Read With You readathon. And it was so good. It was so good. And if you like gothic, gore, witchy type stories, I would definitely pick it up. But if you like just darker fantasy, I still think that you might like it. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And then, of course, we have the series I can't stop talking about with Blood of the Chosen by Django Wexler. I loved the first one. I loved this one. I do love the duality that is this story with a girl working for the Empire, her brother fighting against the Empire, how they clash, how they come together, the way they just live their lives separate from each other, but still knowing that they're going to have to face each other. I love it. I love it. It is very reminiscent of a Star Wars type story, and they do have lightsabers, but it is not a rip of Star Wars. I've said that before, I'll say it again, just so everybody knows. It's not a rip of Star Wars, but it does have a lot of similarities to a Star Wars story. And last, but certainly not least, we have In the Orbit of Sirens by T.A. Bruno, which just might very well be my favorite book of the year. I've had this book for a while, and I got really excited to read it, and then I had some mental health issues and then I just didn't want to read any physical books whatsoever. And then I got the audio, and I was like, you know what? We can immersive read this. It'll be fine. In the Orbit of Sirens was so fantastic. It does a lot of things that I typically don't like the dual timeline. I'm not usually a big fan of dual timeline, but the way that T.A. Bruno utilized it, I think was very well done, because these people over here were aware of this character over here. And so while we were getting this story, we were getting this character's backstory. And so it was really, really cool. I really liked that part of it. And then the weird creatures that you get to see and meet, and the just setting was so cool. I continue to talk about this glowing garden. Why is it glowing? I really want to see this. I think this would make a fantastic show. I would really like to see In the Orbit of Sirens become a TV show. But exploring new worlds, it feels very much like Mass Effect put out a new game. That excitement you get when you sit down to play it and you get to explore this vast new world with all of these aliens, and you get to know these aliens, and you get to know the world and these characters. They're so entrenched in this world, and that leads you to explore. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I do think that On the Winds of Quasars, because I have read that, I do think that one is not quite as good as In the Orbit of Sirens, but it's still very, very good. I will give In the Orbit of Sirens a 5-star and On the Winds of Quasars a 4-star, but I have heard that the final book is even better than In the Orbit of Sirens. So I am hoping that part of what was going on in the Winds of Quasars is middle book syndrome. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. That never puts me off to a series. But yeah, In the Orbit of Sirens might just be my favorite book of the year. Still have yet to read that guy. And that guy might win because it's Anthony Ryan. But so far this year, In the Orbit of Sirens is it. All right, subscribe, do all the fun things, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!